Alright, shalom, shalom, shalom. Kala layam la alahanawa, Yahweh Bashim Yoshai, Bashim Akakodash. This brother Kyle here with another lesson to the Spirit and power of Yahweh Bashim Yoshai. This lesson here, as you see by the title, is called 8644, right? And this is a number that I saw on, we just call it a number plate. And I mean, it's not the first time. I mean, me and a couple of brothers, we always noticing, 144 and whatever number, on number plates and whatnot, you know. But this video just inspired me with those numbers when I saw it, right? Because as I always say, hey, to what are you bashing your shy? Because sometimes you might ask, you're bashing your shy, you're still dealing with neophytes, and the Lord will show you a sign, you know. So some brothers he will show chariots, others he will show the 144 and different signs, dreams, whatnot. So when I saw this, I say, hey, it's so Yapah. It just came to me in spirit. Number 8, you have a number because the infinity sign is similar, right? And Yahweh is infinite. Number 6, number of man, right? And then it has 4 two times. So I check 2 is confirmation and 4 is mercy, right? So it's confirmed that the Lord will have mercy upon us. But we're going to get more into it. So I want to deal with number 8 first in terms of dealing with Yahweh, which ultimately will trickle down to Yahweh Shai as well, because, Yahweh Shai, he's the one that Yahweh is sending to, do the delivering, right? So this is Colossians 1 and verse 12, right? It says, giving thanks unto the Father, which had made us meet to be partakers of the inheritance of the saints in light, right? So you see, the first thing is what we give thanks to Yahweh, right? But we do it too through Yahweh Shai, right? He is the one that Yahweh made the mediator for us to be able to reach him, right? After we transgressed. So verse 13 says, who had delivered us from the power of darkness and had translated us into the kingdom of his dear son, right? So you see what's going on here, right? Who delivered us from the power of darkness, right? Like Esau, right? Because remember the scriptures talk about this world developing darkness in Isaiah 60, gross darkness the people, Romans 13 and 11, where it is the night is fast spent, right? John 3:19, the days were evil because they prefer to hide in the dark that they would get shakes and whatnot, So there are many scriptures where referring to, this world being, dark, and who is the ruler of this world? Esau Edom, right? So it goes on and say, and had translated us into the kingdom of his dear son, right? Because we know, let me bring that out real quick. This is 2nd Ezra 6, and I'll start from 7 to verse 9. It says, then answered I and said, what shall be the parting asunder of the times? Or what shall be the end of the first and the beginning of it that followeth? And he said unto me, from Abraham unto Isaac, when Jacob and Esau were born of him, Esau's hand held first the heel of Esau, right? So, as I always mention when I read in this, a lot of people believe that there is no more prophecy in the Old Testament, right? And they believe the book of Genesis is just solely about the beginning. Now, yes, it tells us a lot of things about the beginning, but in the very first book, it still has a prophecy, or it gives you a representation of a prophecy that is to come, right? Which is mentioned here when it says Jacob's hand first held the heel of Esau. Why is that mentioned here when it is talking about translation from one kingdom to another? It's because it's telling you that even when I mentioned in Jacob, in Genesis, when Jacob held Esau's heel, right? They didn't have to mention something like that if it wasn't nothing of importance. They would have, just say, well, hey, these twins, the so-called twins came out and that was it, But it was specifically mentioned for a reason that Jacob, which is us, was holding the heel of Esau. And it's been made mention here again, right? by the angel, right? So our angel relaying this message onto Ezra and saying, hey, you gotta remember, Jacob, right? The holy healer Esau, which was representing what? The pulling down of his stronghold, right? Because in verse 9 now it says, for Esau is the end of the world, and Jacob is the beginning of it that follow it, right? Because remember, that's the prophecy in Genesis, right? It said what? And the angel, another angel, told them that, told Rebecca that, hey, the elder shall serve the younger, right? That's going to happen, And when they talk about that, they're talking about the kingdom, of course, because Esau is the elder son, right? Right now we're serving him, but that is due to the curses. But ultimately, right? And it even had time in the past before when it is they still end up serving us, like under the time of King Solomon, King David and whatnot, right? We ruled over them, But the main prophecy is for them to rule under us until the Lord decides to wipe them out, which would be after the 1,000 years, right? So that is the whole main thing about it. So going back to the Colossians 1, and I didn't read so far. Yeah. And well, I read 13, but it was pertaining to the translation of one kingdom to the next, right? So the kingdom of his dear son, that's why I read the second and just 9, right? Because I think it's Sirach 10 and 8 where it says because of unrighteous dealings, the kingdom is translated from one people to another, right? So the Lord showing us mercy, which again we're going to get into when we reach number 4, right? But let me read out this. It says, verse 15, Salakia, and verse 14, in whom we have redemption through his blood, even the forgiveness of sins, right? Who blood? Yahushua, right? When he died on the cross for us, right? Verse 15, it says, who's the image of the invisible power, which is Yahweh, the firstborn of every creature, right? So Yahushua is the firstborn of every creature, right? That is the preeminence, right? He was the first of the invisible God, because remember, nobody never see Yahweh, but they see Yahweh through Yahushua, because Yahushua is the express image of his Father, right? So he goes on and says, for by him were all things created that are in heaven and that are in earth, visible and invisible, whether they be thrones or dominions, principalities or powers, all things were created by him and for him. And he is before all things, and by him all things consist, right? So therefore, right, Yahweh dies again. Why I did a video a while back, the understanding of, the only begotten son, right? Because Yahweh was Yahweh was the only thing that Yahweh begot, like physically for himself, and then through Yahweh everything else was made, That is why I say he was the firstborn of every creature, because man is a creature, So it goes on and says, and he is before all things, and by him all things consist, and he is the head of the body, the church, who is the beginning, the firstborn from the dead, that in all things he might have the preeminence, right? And preeminence means first, right? He before everything. That's what it's been saying, right? Now, as I said, number 8 is Yahweh's number, right? And they're speaking about Yahushai. But again, Yahweh, Bashim Yahushai, they are one, right? In like spirit and mind, not the Holy Trinity bullshit that they try to feed you about, Yahweh made us to obey Yahushai, because when you go into John 5, it gives you that. John 5, about probably a little higher. Yeah. John 5 and 19, it says, then answered Yahushua and said unto them, verily, verily, I say unto you, the Son can do nothing of himself, but what he seeth the Father do. For what things soever he doeth, these also doeth the Son likewise. For the Father loveth the Son, and showeth him all things that himself doeth. and he will show him greater works than these, that ye may marvel, right? For as the Father raiseth up the dead, and quickeneth them, even so the Son quickeneth whom he will. For the Father judgeth no man, but had committed all judgment unto the Son, that all men should honor the Son, even as they honor the Father. He that honoreth not the Son, honoreth not the Father, which hath sent him. So you see, you can't get to Yahweh unless you deal with Yahweh Shai, right? So we have to give Yahweh Shai that respect, right? We have to give him that honor, that praise, because that is the one, that is the man that Yahweh put in place. So by giving Yahweh Shai preeminence, you're giving Yahweh preeminence, you're putting them first, because to obey Yahweh Shai is to obey Yahweh, so that is it, right? That is it, because the scripture also talk about Yahweh being the ancient of days, so regardless, he was before everything, right? He always existed. That is literally his name, Yahweh, right? Yahweh means he exists, he is, so he will always be first, right? Yahweh Shai, the Alpha and the Omega, according to Revelation, right? He is the beginning and the end, right? So you can't have a Yahweh without a Yahweh Shai, right? And you can't have Yahweh Shai without Yahweh, right? That's how the Lord set it. So regardless, they had to be first, right? So if we moving on now to number 6, basically, which as I mentioned earlier, the number 6 is the number of man, right? Now in this case here, I would view the number of man, number 6 here, as a men that pertaining to what I view through the Spirit was the elect. Because remember, we're dealing with Yahweh and Yahweh Shai for number 8, and then afterwards is mercy, right? So it's mercy for the elect, right? Now, could get some precepts on the elect. Let me pull up. So this is Isaiah 42:1. It says, behold my servant, right? Who's Yahweh's servant? Jacob, right? Whom I uphold, mine elect, in whom my soul delighted. I have put my spirit upon him. He shall bring forth judgment to the Gentiles, right? And that is dealing with the elect, right? Now, really and truly, the whole nation of Israel is the elect, but it have a elect out of that elect, right? So I dealing with the elect out of the elect, but ultimately it's still, the children of Israel. They're just rebellious right now. But because of Yahweh Shai's mercy, Yahweh's mercy, the nation of Israel is going to come back through the elect that's going to be saved, right? This is Isaiah 45:4. It says, for Jacob my servant's sake, and Israel mine elect. So you see, as a modern nation, right? The nation being the elect. I have even called thee by thy name. I have surnamed thee, though thou hast not known me, right? The Lord surnamed us, right? Remember, we carrying Yasharallah, right? He the prince of the power. We have Yahweh's surname, basically. You understand? So, we being after our Father, right? So, it's so Yapah, as I said, that we being after our Father, because again, he had to be first, right? So the 8 was first, and then we come after, right? The number of man, which is the elect, right? The Lord giving mercy unto that, which is where the number 4 and 4 comes in. So I guess we could dabble in that too one time, because I mentioned it many times, right? So we could deal with the 2 at the same time, the 6 and the 4, right? So this is Isaiah 65:8. It says, thus said the Lord Yahweh, as the new wine is found in the cluster, and one say, destroy it not, for a blessing is in it, so will I do for my servant's sake, that I may not destroy them all. That is it. What that is, that is mercy for the elect. You understand? The Lord said, hey, don't destroy that, right? Because new wine could found in the cluster. Sometimes you might have grapes, because remember the Lord called it the cluster of the grapes, right? And you're going to have bad grapes in between, but some people might just want to throw it all and call that George, buy a fresh one. But hey, the Lord say, hey, don't discard that just so. Search through, you might find a little one or two that could still to be edible, or to have it for the wine, You could use it for the wine still. Because though Remember when you're making wine, it's had the fruit is basically had to be sour to put it in a nutshell, right? I don't know winemaker, but I know that much, right? So it'll still be usable because remember that is being merciful, because the Lord, as I say, could have cast away, us, we representing the grapes, and say, well, you know what, forget that. But the Lord made use for it, to turn it back into something still good, right? Which will be the wine, right? And it say what? So will I do for my servant's sake, that I may not destroy them all, right? So the Lord's intention is not to destroy the whole nation of Israel, but to restore it back, But the whole nation is going to come back just like that, so that's why he has his elect. So it goes on to verse 9, it says, and I will bring forth a seed out of Jacob, and out of Judah, an inheritor of my mountains, and mine elect shall inherit it, and my servant shall dwell there, right? So the Lord have a purpose, right, which will be merciful to the elect, right? So tell me that is not a Yapah thing. That is a very Yapah thing, So the Lord showing us signs, even with numbers, right? Because it's so Yapah. When it came to me, I immediately, because this was when I was on my way to work, I was in a taxi myself, and a car passed, and I saw those numbers. And that is to show we seeing number plates every day, right? But it's just how the Spirit spoke to me through that, and I just started meditating, and I was like, hey, Spirit, tell me something. And I jotted down one time. I have it on my next phone here, I'm watching it right now. I write down the numbers, and every idea that I had for each number that came, I write it down one time, because I said I don't want to forget. I'll do a video on that later, right, which is now, So that is how Yapah it is. The Lord inspire this video through those numbers, because numbers have meaning, we know that. So let me see if I just get a couple more precepts here and I could close out. Alright, I'll read Matthew 24 here. I'm going down a bit, right? So it says, Matthew 24 and 21, for then shall be great tribulation, such as was not to be since the beginning of the world to this time, nor ever shall be. And except those days should be shortened, there should no flesh be saved. But for the elect's sake, those days shall be shortened. Right? So it's what? Mostly for the elect, because the Lord knows if it is the days will shorten, right? The elect could grow weary. I mean, like, hey, boy. See, because we already fed up at this place. Right? We really and truly fed up at this place, but because the Lord showing us these signs consistently, and we could see the time speeding up, we know it giving us, it having us clinging to hope, clinging to the faith, and believing in Yahweh Shai, because we only humans still at the end of the day, we're striving for perfection, so we will grow weary, right? Because come on, I'm pretty sure everybody in GMS are aware of brothers who got kicked out, or even sisters who bugged out, because why? A lot of them grow weary of defeat, they grow weary of, waiting on Yahweh Shai, They start to think who went back into the world because they find they see nothing happening and thing and this and that, and it's a scary thing, because your judgment gonna be more dread to the people who wasn't even in the shoot, But it goes on to verse 23. Then if any man shall say unto you, lo, here is Hamashiach, or there, believe it not. For there shall arise false Hamashiachs and false prophets, and shall show great signs and wonders, in so much that if it were possible, they shall deceive the very elect. So that is to show you, right? There are people who will not come here with talking things from the Bible and all, right? Mixing truth with lies, right? And make it sound so believable. And funny enough, I read this precept before, and I never thought about it like this before, but for instance, I came across that already. That was a good couple years back, but it could be about 3-4 years ago, where it is a guy, and I literally said this out my own mouth when he was talking about Adam and Eve. Everybody had their own interpretation of that story, right? But shockingly enough, that was one of the first few breakdowns that I learned and understood, and that is a difficult thing to understand. When you're teaching a baby, you wouldn't teach them so much about the book of Genesis because of how metaphorical it is, and it hard to grasp for a lot of people. That was one of the first few things that I learned and I understood immediately. This guy was breaking it down, or trying to break it down and saying how now the snake had a penis and she had sex with the snake, that's why she get cursed and this and that. And the way how he was breaking it down, I say, boy, if I didn't have the proper understanding, I might have believed that, because he make it sound like it makes so much sense. Well, the other individual who was next to me listening, he did believe it, and that's why I say, I read the scripture so many times and it never even came to me through the Spirit. It literally just came that this is what the scripture basically saying, if it were possible, they shall deceive the very elect. That is how convincing it will sound, I'm not saying I'm part of the elect. I'm a hopeful elect, right? Because I'm hoping to be a part of it. But I'm just saying, like an example, that, hey, the Lord could have had me believe that sweep up that so and broom might bug out long time, But to what Yapah again, he showed mercy, right? So it goes on in verse 25. Behold, I have told you before. Wherefore, if they shall say unto you, behold, he is in the desert, go not forth, behold, he is in the secret chambers, believe it not. Right? And this is something we did a video on a while back, before I didn't even know about this precept here. I was extremely intrigued as how accurate the scripture was, that because it was a street works where it is, some people say that they found the body of quote unquote Jesus in the desert, and the scripture literally say, if they say they find it in the desert, believe it not, that grew my faith so much stronger. When I said, I was like, wow, look at that, and this written in red, so Yahushua was also a prophet, right? Verse 27, it says, for as the lightning cometh out of the east and shineth even unto the west, so shall also the coming of the Son of Man be. For wheresoever the carcass is, there will the eagles be gathered together. Immediately after the tribulation of those days shall the sun be darkened, and the moon shall not give her light, and the stars shall fall from heaven, and the powers of the heaven shall be shaken. Right? So this talking about the nuclear missiles and whatnot. The mushroom cloud within itself, even the chariots too, gonna block out the sun, right? And the moon and whatnot. Right? That is the stars falling. That is what you're talking about, the stars falling. So when they say the moon and things shall not give her light, the sun shall be dark and the moon shall not give her light, is because the mushroom cloud and the chariots and whatnot going to be blocking up everything. Because remember the scripture talk about the Lord waxed strong with the thousands of heaven, and then also he have thousands and even thousands of angels, just roughly paraphrasing. Because angels going to be driving the chariots. So it's a lot, right? Verse 30 it says, and then shall appear the sign of the Son of Man in heaven, Salakia, and then shall all the tribes of the earth mourn, and they shall see the Son of Man coming in the clouds, which is chariots of heaven, with power and great glory. And he shall send his angels with a great sound of a trumpet, and they shall gather together his elect from the four winds, from the end of heaven to the other. Right? So that is mercy. Right? Because remember, when they read Job 5, let me read it just to back it up. Job 5 and 19. Right? This is Job 5 and 19. It says, he shall deliver thee in 6 troubles, yea, in 7 shall no evil touch thee. Right? So, just talking about the missiles. Right? The 7th. Right? 7 is completion. Right? Number 7. Right? Now that is the, the last thing to really, well, I shouldn't say that. That wouldn't be the last thing. If you're including the laser missiles and whatnot, yeah, but the 7th plague is the missiles, right? They put it simple. So that is why, remember when it talk about the sun and the moon shall be darkened, that's the missiles landing. But this scripture telling you here, in the 6th trouble, right? Yea, in the 7th shall no evil touch thee. So when in the 7th trouble, which is the missiles, that not one touch you, you're not going to be touched, right? you're going to be unaffected by the radiation, the heat, the whatever it is, you know, because different things would be affecting you. It's either you get hit directly with the missile, you know, you get the shock wave, you know, well, the shock wave inclusive of the blast wave, and also let me say, as we don't here in Trinidad, it could cause a tsunami to come across here, so you could be hit by the tsunami, right? Or you could be infected by the radiation it gives off, you know, the biochemicals, you know, in the atmosphere and whatnot. Different things would affect it. You Lord say none of these things will touch us, right? Because why? It's mercy, you know. So this is so Yapah too, because the amount of times I mentioned it before I even jump to number 4, right? As I mentioned earlier in the video, 2 is confirmation. So it's been confirmed multiple times through the video, even before I reached the example or the breakdown of number 4, right? It's been confirmed, you know, multiple times that, you know, it's mercy the Lord gonna have for his elect, you know, when once the elect put him first, and the elect would put him first, right? Because there's the elect, you know, the elect will have certain traits, as Elder Apostle Kabah always goes into, you know. But hey, I hope this lesson was edifying and inspiring as well, and a faith booster. So yeah, until next time, say shalom, and a Bible ball to this place. All praises to Yahweh Shem Yahushai, to Yahweh Shem Yahushai for this insight, you know. Shalom.